Good day, friends. It is Student Pastor Erin here once again from Trinity Lutheran Church in Edmonton, Alberta. Today, I want to share a book with you by my favorite Irish writer and poet, Padraig O'Tuama. It is entitled In the Shelter, Finding a Home in the World. That's In the Shelter, Finding a Home in the World. Padraig is a poet, storyteller, theologian, and mediator from Ireland. He works to bring art and theology into public and civic life. For a number of years, he was the director of a place called the Corrymeela Community, an intentional community in Ireland dedicated to peace and restoration. He often writes about the impacts of conflict and war in Ireland during the Troubles. For himself, he writes about what it was like being gay and raised in a Catholic household and having to heal from abuses from that religious tradition. And he writes about peace in its multi-storied bodily expressions. The little quotation I want to share with you today finds Padraig needing to understand Jesus' life more. His body, his community, his lived experience. So often, Christianity zeroes in on Jesus' death. But as we're learning right now during this time of pandemic, if we focus on the death too much without living our lives as differently as it feels right now, even trying to see resurrection from that death can sometimes be incomplete. Let's begin with a reading from Psalm 31. I am forgotten as though I were dead. I have become like broken pottery. For I hear many whispering, terror on every side. They conspire against me and plot to take my life. But I trust in you, Lord. I say, you are my God. My times are in your hands. Deliver me from the hands of my enemies, from those who pursue me. Let your face shine on your servant. Save me in your unfailing love. Padraig writes, God may have been onto a good thing had the incarnation been on my turf. And I think that's the point, really. If the incarnation is to mean anything, it has to mean something on our own turf. It has to enter into the clay of our landscapes, the texture of our languages, and the tensions of our cultures. In the introduction to the Anchor Book of New American Short Stories, Ben Marcus wrote that there are only two types of story. A person went on a journey, and a stranger came to town. In a way, one can understand the Gospels as both of those stories. A God went on a journey towards the gardens of the city, and a stranger came to town in the body of a Galilean. Hello to the story of beginnings. So much of the life of Jesus is summed up in the cross. The image of the cross is so often seen as fashion, as religion, as politics, as patriotism. There are crosses with Jesus on it and crosses with Jesus off it. And yet, while many argue that the cross was the most important aspect of his life, it cannot be understood without understanding the richness of his whole life. Who taught him to read? Who made his clothes? Who were his friends? What made him cry? What were his first words? It is a pity that the image of the Madonna and Child is seen only as a denominational image, mostly only loved and displayed by the liturgical traditions. The way I see it, this image of a woman with a baby is the image of incarnation, and an image for all people who approach the faith of the incarnation. It says, flesh of my flesh. And it says that body and blood and sinew and sweat became holy in a story and became holy us. Irenaeus of Lyons is credited with saying, "What was not assumed was not redeemed." He was arguing against those who saw Jesus as a puppet strung with God's strings, not really human, just pretending, light covered in a thin layer of skin. To appreciate the death of this Jewish stranger, we must appreciate the bones of this man. It is not unholy to ask about his ignorance. If he had to learn, then it meant that he was limited, and his limitations were not antithetical to his life, identity, and goodness. When studying theology, I tried to memorize theological equations using words like the hypostatic union, discussing Jesus' dual nature as both God and human. And I heard philosophical lectures about whether, on the cross, it was both of the natures of Jesus that died, or only one. I can't remember the opinions. I've always been much more interested in poetry than mathematics. But what I do remember is that in order to understand the death of Jesus, we must understand the birth of Jesus, the life of Jesus, the friendships of Jesus, and the tensions of Jesus. What incarnation is happening within you today? Around you? In your world? What life is being coaxed into existence, creating new relationship, or new community, new wonder? What words of Padraig stuck out for you today? It's not easy for many of us to see Jesus as limited. Yet in taking human form, there were indeed limitations of all kinds. In our limitedness of isolation and non-touching, in our touch deprivation and lack of bodily contact, it's so important to start having conversations about what theology means in our bodies. Many of us were raised in traditions that prized the head, the mental aspects of ourselves, as the supreme virtue. Reason, reason, reason. Feelings were to be viewed with suspicion. While it's true that feelings are transient, faith in the head has its major drawbacks too. Many Christian traditions absorbed the Greco-Roman tradition of shaming the physical body, of seeing it as less than. So to talk about fleshy incarnation sets us on edge. To discover a theology not just of the body, but in the body, can make us nervous. And yet, Jesus is demonstrating this very thing, the divine in the body. It's not just our minds that are crying out for connection right now. It's not just our emotions. Our cells are screaming for what we are created to encounter. Physical connection, physical proximity, physical interaction. We can't think our way out of it. We can't feel our way forward. We have to encounter this entire experience in our entire bodies, in all of who we are. So today, I encourage you to see yourselves, your whole bodies, in the holiness of the incarnation. Marvel at the wonder that is you, all of you. The same wonder that created Jesus, all of Jesus. The same wonder that knits us together each day as we move forward. Today's prayer is one of Padraig's poems that I've been sharing with our church council and our church youth group at various points during this past year. And I think it's applicable here in our time of social distancing. It's called Shaking Hands, and it's in Padraig's book of poetry called Sorry for Your Troubles, if anyone's interested in checking it out. And I highly encourage you to do so. Because what's the alternative? Because of courage. Because of loved ones lost. Because no more. Because it's a small thing. Shaking hands. It happens every day. Because I heard of one man whose hands haven't stopped shaking since a market day in Omaha. Because it takes a second to say hate, but it takes longer, much longer to be a great leader. Much, much longer. Because shared space without human touching doesn't amount to much. Because it's easier to speak to your own than to hold the hand of someone whose side has been previously described, proscribed, denied. Because it is tough. Because it is tough. Because it is meant to be tough. And this is the stuff of memory, the stuff of hope, the stuff of gesture and meaning and leading. Because it has taken so long. Because it has taken land and money and languages and barrels of blood and grieving. Because lives have been lost. Because lives have been taken. Because to be bereaved is to be troubled by grief. Because more than 2 troubled peoples live here. Because I know a woman whose hand hasn't been shaken since she was a man. Because shaking a hand is only a part of the start. Because I know a woman whose touch calmed a man whose heart was breaking. Because privilege is not to be taken lightly. Because this might just be good. Because who said that this would ever be easy? Because some people love what you stand for, and for some, if you can, they can. Because solidarity means a common hand. Because a hand is only a hand. So hang on to it. So join your much discussed hands. We need this for one small second. So touch, so lead. Our blessing today, as usual, was written by Canadian author Sarah Bessey. Receive God's blessing today. May the peace of God give you renewed hope and wisdom. May you find the strength you already carry within you to be enough. May the God of grace be sufficient. May you find a deep breath when the air around you is thin. May you grow in compassion in these days. May you love well, not in spite of these anxious times, but because of them. Amen. Go in peace today, friends. We will make it through this. Bye.